Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are talking about physical media collections and why it is important to curate them from time to time. Whether it be DVDs, Blu-Rays, and 4Ks, or video games, it is important to curate them for a multitude of reasons, but for the sake of this video, I will give 4 primary arguments for why curation is important, and I'm going to focus more on DVDs, Blu-Rays, and 4Ks because that is the largest collection that I have personally compared to my video games. Not meaning to brag, but sometimes bigger is not always better. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Let's get right into the reasons for why curation for a physical media collection is oh so important. This is the most practical reason. It doesn't matter if you have a 300 square foot studio apartment or a 100,000 square foot mega mansion in the Hollywood Hills. It's not a matter of if you run out of room, it's all a matter of when. If your goal is to collect every single movie under the sun, then your efforts simply are futile. You can only acquire for so long before you realize, hey, I can't walk into my bathroom because there are thousands of DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4Ks stacked up everywhere. The same can be said for retro games, right? Hey, I can't walk into my bathroom because there are, hundreds, if not thousands of NES, Super Nintendo, N64, and GameCube games that are just stacked up everywhere I look. I mean, I can't take one step without kicking a pile without risking falling it down. And I know that is an extreme example to collect every known movie under the sun, but the point still stands. You will run out of room in due time if you keep acquiring without curating the collection from time to time. I personally ran into this problem where I was starting to run out of room in my bedroom and I had no choice but to start going through the collection that I had built up. I had to determine what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of. Another aspect that you have to consider is what if you have to move with the collection? Are you really going to spend the time, effort, and energy to haul those thousands of DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4Ks across the country? Again, the same thing can be said about gaming. Are you really going to spend the time, effort, and energy to haul all of those NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, N64 games across the country? Because yes, they take up a lot of boxes, they can get extremely heavy, and they take a lot of fucking space. And let's all be honest here. We all have movies or shows that we found at a thrift store or pawn shop 10 years ago that we haven't watched in at least 8 years. Continuing to acquire without curating is just masking the current problem of your collection and actually making it worse. I think all of us can say that movies that we liked 10 years ago are movies that we no longer like now. I'll use myself as the example. There was a time when I liked Will Ferrell and Judd Apatow comedies respectively. I had a good chunk of both Will Ferrell comedies like Talladega Nights and Blades of Glory, and Judd Apatow comedies like Superbad and Knocked Up. I was also really getting into Oliver Stone's movies back in 2014-2015, along with Martin Scorsese's movies. After my initial curation, I got rid of the vast majority of my Will Ferrell comedies, and I only kept like one Judd Apatow comedy, and I think that was Pineapple Express. Yeah, the Pineapple Express is the only Judd Apatow comedy that I actually kept. And I only kept Old School, which was the Will Ferrell comedy. Yeah, and like I said, and I did bring up Pineapple Express. See, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I got rid of every other Will Ferrell and Judd Apatow comedy simply because I wasn't watching them anymore. Those movies were only clogging up my collection, not benefiting it. The same could be said for gaming. How many different genres were you into growing up? Like, let's say that you were really, really into first-person shooters growing up. I'm just using first-person shooters as the example. You had everything from Call of Duty to Resistance: Fall of Man to... God, I'm just trying to list series off the top of my head here. Killzone was a pretty good series. Titanfall was pretty good. What's another one? You had a Fracture, that was a third-person shooter. But anyway, not the point. How many shooters have you hung on to because you were a fan of the genre at one time, but you're no longer a fan now? Let's say you're really getting into 3D platformers. Why are you keeping all of your shooters, despite the fact that 80 to 90% of them are just sitting around and gathering dust? But anyway, I'm tangenting off into video games. I'll get back into the movies, and And I'll go off with this, that, you know, I did the same thing with Oliver Stone in regards of just getting rid of his movies. I got rid of all of his movies for the simple reason of I wasn't watching them anymore. Same with Scorsese after Silence released. There was a time when I couldn't stand westerns. Couldn't fucking stand them. I thought it was the most boring genre of them all back in the early 2010s. Now in my mid to late 20s, the western genre is one of my favorites. There are quite a few westerns that I had on DVD over the years that I regret getting rid of. The one that immediately comes to mind is The Long Riders, that had both Dennis and Randy Quaid, David Keith and Robert Carradine, Stacey and James Keach, Christopher Guest. It was a packed movie all about Jesse James and his outlaw gang, formerly known as the Long Riders. I watched it when I got it back in 2012 and thought it was the most boring movie I'd ever seen, so I got rid of it. Then 2020 happened, and I rediscovered it by chance, and I had really gone back into the Western genre. Yes, just because you liked something 10 years ago doesn't mean you're going to like it now. Just because you hated something 10 years ago doesn't mean you're going to hate it now. Just like I said, tastes can and will change over time. Preserving something just because you liked it 10 years ago, but you haven't seen it in 8 years, is contributing to the problem, both in running out of room and refusing to expand your horizons as a movie fan. There's nothing wrong with holding on to a movie or show that you still like, but it's important to realize that, hey, I'm probably not going to like this forever. This one is very self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Let's say that you got a copy of Hurricane Heist, or Crawl, or Need for Speed, or Hercules with Dwayne Johnson and said, hey, that movie wasn't as bad as everyone made it out to be. That's great. But then you put that movie on your shelf and never watched it again despite thinking it wasn't as bad as everyone made it out to be. Ask yourself, what good is that movie or TV show doing in your collection if you don't have the urge to rewatch it? You're thinking, well, maybe one day I will want to rewatch it, and what if I don't have it on my shelf? This then leads back to the reality of you will run out of room at some point. You are going to have to determine what movies and shows you have no urge to watch anymore at some point. All of us have those movies and shows in our collections. It could be movies that everyone agrees are terrible, or it could be something that's universally beloved. It doesn't matter. We all need to examine our collections of DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4Ks for those movies that we watched once and never watched again at some point. The only question is when. Do you want to do it now while your collection may still be manageable, or do you want to wait until you have no choice because you're out of room? If you've been collecting long enough, eventually you're going to get into different formats. The most common upgrade to talk about is DVD to Blu-ray, but some of you might be old enough to remember VHS to DVD upgrades. I was one of them. I actually remember VHS. I grew up in the tail end of VHS, and don't even get me started on retro game collecting and label upgrades. That, to me, is just ridiculous. If you've been collecting long enough, eventually you might upgrade some of your movies from DVD to Blu-ray for a multitude of reasons. I upgraded Gangs of New York from DVD to Blu-ray because the DVD version of the movie was 2 discs. I simply got tired of getting to a certain point in the movie and having to put in disc 2 to continue the movie. Upgrading to Blu-ray where the entire movie was on 1 disc was just more convenient. Sometimes the movie just looks better on Blu-ray than it ever did on DVD. But after you upgrade the movie to the superior format, whatever that format may be, who knows, you may be watching this video in 5 years and Blu-ray may be obsolete, 4K may be dead, and it may be something new. Why are you still hanging on to your VHS or DVD copy of that same movie? And there are some legitimate reasons for this. I remember when all of the Star Trek movies were initially put on Blu-ray, but the director's edition of Star Trek the Motion Picture wasn't given the Blu-ray treatment. For a long time, Star Trek the Motion Picture, the director's edition, was only available on DVD. It wasn't until 2022 when Paramount went back to give Star Trek the Motion Picture, the director's edition, a 4K scan when they put that up on Paramount Plus and released it to Blu-ray and 4K. But most movies don't fall into this category if they're popular enough. If you have all of the X-Men movies on Blu-ray, then why are you hanging on to your DVD copies of those movies? Before we go any further, I know that the Blu-ray releases tend to come with the DVD copy and the 4K releases tend to come with the Blu-ray copy. My issue is not with those Blu-ray DVD combo packs and 4K UHD Blu-ray combo packs. What I'm talking about is you bought all of the X-Men movies on DVD years prior, and you recently acquired all of those movies on Blu-ray within the last couple of years. and I'm only bringing this up because I did that very recently. Why are you continuing to hang on to those quote-unquote lesser formats if it didn't come pre-packaged in a combo pack? This circles back to my first point of you will run out of room at some point. Why did you acquire the Blu-ray of a movie that you already own on DVD if you're not going to get rid of the DVD? To me, that just seems like a waste of money to upgrade the movie to a higher definition format if you never intended on getting rid of the DVD copy, the standard definition format. Again, if it came pre-packaged in a Blu-ray DVD combo, 4K UHD Blu-ray combo pack, you can't really do anything about that. But honestly, again, ask yourself, why did you upgrade X-Men X2, X-Men United to Blu-ray if you were going to hang on to your DVD copy for, years and years to come? I'm bringing this topic up because personally, I was that guy that waited 10 years to do a proper curation of my DVD and Blu-ray collection. So far, I've gotten rid of over 1,000 movies and TV shows, and I'm not even close to being done. That's how bad it got. I now compare a movie/TV collection to a bonsai tree, if you've ever seen The Karate Kid. You have to prune some of the branches off carefully, because if you don't, the whole tree dies. I could have continued to acquire and acquire and acquire, but I realized that that would only be masking the problem, not solving it. For all of the reasons that I listed throughout the video, that's why I believe curation is so important to any physical media collection. Don't do what I do and wait until you had no choice but to curate it. It's okay to not like something that you liked 10 years ago. As long as you can wrap your head around that, the curation process will be a lot easier. One other thing. If you're into collecting just as an investment and nothing more, if you hope that your collection will be worth more money than when you bought it, then get the fuck out now. Newsflash, 95% of all DVDs and Blu-rays are not even worth the cases that they're being housed in monetarily. They're not even worth the discs that they're being printed on. And if your collection is too large, 10,000 plus titles, then you also run the risk of no one, not even resellers, wanting to touch it. Think about the amount of time it would take the other person to sort a collection that large. They may determine that it isn't even worth it, even if they only offer 10 cents per DVD or Blu-ray. But if you're collecting because you like movies and TV shows, then the point still stands. Don't be afraid to get rid of stuff that you liked 10 years ago that you no longer like now. Please don't do what I did and wait until you had no choice but to curate. Believe me, it will save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. And one other point, if you're only holding on to certain movies just because of, fear of censorship, right? I remember the big brouhaha a few years ago when activists were trying to get Gone with the Wind pulled from HBO Max, and everybody and their grandmother was running out to buy a copy of Gone with the Wind on DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K. Excuse me. I remember when everyone and their grandmother was running out to buy Gone with the Wind on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K. Nowadays, that movie is virtually worthless. Why? Because the activists weren't successful in taking it down. And here's another thing you have to consider. None of these movies and TV shows at this point in time are genuinely going to go away. It's not like the 1930s and 40s when the movie studios controlled all of their own distribution. So if you miss the movie in the theater, you miss the movie. But nowadays with torrents, like I said, nothing is ever truly going to go away. So let's just put, for example, let's say that those activists were successful in deplatforming Gone with the Wind. I guarantee you, there would have been a lot of people willing to seed it up onto torrent sites simply for preservation. So, did you really need to run out and buy that DVD or Blu-ray copy when you could have downloaded it? When you could have just torrented it if you wanted to see it? Not really, but the point still stands. If you're only holding on to something because you fear that activists are going to, censor it on digital platforms, that's now a situation of the collection owns you don't own the collection. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here before I drag this video out way longer than it needs to be. If you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.